I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and I couldn't walk without an assistive device. And I just kept eating steak. My last MRI showed no MS activity. So you don't get over bipolar disorder and MS, but eating fatty animal meat totally changed my life. I had debilitating mental illness. I had bipolar disorder that had turned into rapid cycling. So I was doing well whenever I had 3 days out of the week that I could function. But then when it turned into rapid cycling, I could no longer practice. And my brother reached out to me, told me about you. And I started the carnivore diet February of 2019. And I went straight from standard American diet, donuts, pizzas, soda, ramen noodles, to ribeyes, burgers. And I just kept going. And my last depressive or manic episode was April of 2019. My psychiatrist slowly tapered me off of all my meds. I stayed under his care and I went back to work full time in June of 2019, started coaching with MeatRx, was certified through MeatRx to be a carnivore coach, and quickly realized that I didn't have as much of a place in the mental health field because licensing board and the insurance panels don't want you talking about food. So I quickly said, forget about the letters behind my name. And I said, call me a coach. And I just moved my entire practice online. And now I help people all over the world with borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, anxiety, depression, all the stuff. And then the other part of my story is that through all of this, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and I couldn't walk without an assistive device. And I had delayed and slurred speech, multiple MRIs, lumbar puncture, and I had this knowing and all of this information from you and many doctors. And I just kept eating steak. And my last MS episode or symptom was May of 2019. My last MRI showed no MS activity. So you don't get over bipolar disorder and MS, but eating fatty animal meat totally changed my life.
Probably at no point did either of them suggest diet was either causal or curative or even beneficial for any
No.
disease. Is that fair to say?
Yes. And actually the neurologist, as soon as I told him what I was doing and what I was eating, he referred me to a nutritionist because he said I had an imbalanced diet. Yeah. And he referred me to a nutritionist. I never followed up, never went to the appointment, but he didn't want to know anything about what I was eating or what I was doing. He was just concerned about me getting on the medication. Yeah, my very first MRI was in March, and then the next MRI was a month later, and the neurologist even said, there's a 50% reduction of your lesion. And then the next one, every subsequent MRI, it showed either a reduction or now it shows no MS activity. I don't play around. I'm not like, oh, it's like my birthday or it's Christmas or it's blah, 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 or it's St. Patrick's Day. Like I literally eat a steak or a burger.
Now we have people like Chris Palmer, George E. and some of these others that are, they're seeing this whole mental health therapy I guess they're talking about that's becoming more popular. But we've been talking and addressing this stuff for quite a while now. So it's good to see that.
They've actually been like a bully, very negative in saying that I will end up in a wheelchair and that it's reckless that I am not taking their medication. And I reached out to Michaela Peterson after one of my appointments, and I was in the parking lot just like crying because of what the neurologist said to me. And I sent her a message and I was like, Michaela, I know you can't give advice or anything, but am I being reckless with my health? And she said, Emily, you have no symptoms. No, you're not being reckless. just follow your inner guidance, your inner knowing, and keep going. And I kept doing that regardless of the bleak outlook that the neurologist gave me, saying that I was going to be in a wheelchair. And who knows? It's been 5 years. Who knows?
Still the same thing. Hey, you've been 3 years symptom free, and yet you're going to be in a wheelchair if you don't take.
Yep. Honestly, I really enjoy feeling good, and I enjoy the food freedom, because before I was an addict with sugar and with processed food. I had to eat every 2 to 4 hours, and I was constantly obsessing about my next meal, and experiencing this food freedom where it's just bliss. And I feel so good. And the mental clarity, I have more mental clarity now than I've had in 15, 20 years. Yeah, absolutely. And if you just look at the nature of the disease, is that you have a deteriorated myelin sheath, and the myelin sheath is made out of fat. So it's just logical to eat more fat. And I noticed that I had this just incessant craving whenever I first started, is the fattier the meat, the better. I needed that. I felt like I needed that. And so I just followed that intuition to eat more fat. And I noticed that whenever I would just not pay attention and I would eat some lean meat, I just didn't feel as good. And so then I always just more towards the fatty meat. And I didn't mean to, but I lost 120 pounds. And so that was also something that really shocked me, was the amount of high fat that I ate, and I still lost 120 pounds. What happened was I did a before and after picture sometime in 2019. And I sent it to you and I said, thank you for saving my life. And I had all of my symptoms before and after, and I had already lost the weight by then. I'm 5'8". I was 260 pounds. And now I got down to 130. Now I'm very comfortable at 140. For me, the mental relief was the biggest thing for me, because I had been so severely mentally ill for 40 years. And so it was just all a different shade of dark my whole first 40 years. And then I think it was, I want to say about a month, 2 months in, I experienced a glimpse of hope. And it was such a difference, because everything else had been so dark, and it only lasted for 10 minutes that first time. But it was such a relief to know that my brain was even capable of experiencing hope. And then the next day it was 15 minutes. And then it just got to be more, until now I can't have a bad day. I could have a flat tire, an argument with my spouse. I could have anything happen to me, and I just have this baseline of joy. And so that was absolutely everything to me. He called it the meat diet, and he was just like, just keep doing the meat diet. And I think that whenever you have a spouse, you have somebody that is so miserable and has tried, at my most, I was on 900 milligrams of lithium, 80 milligrams of Prozac, 80 milligrams of Adderall just to get out of bed every day, and then Ambien to sleep every night. So we had already thrown the kitchen sink at all of this. And so he was just like, yeah, do whatever you got. Take your best shot. I felt like they were just trying anything and everything to give me any morsel of relief. And I just had none. I just couldn't survive. I was so miserable day in and day out. I remember many sessions I had with my therapist where I wouldn't even talk the whole session. I would just sit there and sob. I couldn't even form words. I was just not able to function. And then that's whenever he started to see, whenever everything cleared up, he was just like, oh my gosh, you're completing sentences and there's light in your eye, and you just smiled and you just had a positive thought and you just talked about the future. This is a completely different person. Like, I literally transformed in front of my therapist's eyes, and he'd been working with me for 8 years. Cold turkey. Like I said, I was eating ramen noodles and donuts and pizza and all the things. And then February 24th of 2019, I ate only animal meat. So I allowed myself chicken wings, bacon, breakfast sausage, fatty pork butt, salmon, shrimp, crawfish, all the things, anything that was animal meat. I don't know why, but I never included dairy or eggs. Just became this experiment for me. And I wanted as clean of an experiment as possible. And so I didn't want to have the extra variable of dairy or eggs. And so I just stayed with that. And I would say within 5 months, maybe 6 months, I realized that I didn't feel best on pork or chicken. And I just went all the way down to beef. And then I went down to fresh farm beef. I definitely think it was a perfect storm of the pharmaceuticals that I was on and then the foods that I was eating. And I was insatiable. Like when I would make cookies, I would make 2 batches of chocolate chip cookies so that I could eat the dough of one batch. And then I could cook the cookies and then eat the cookies from the other batch. I would have peanut butter on my nightstand so that if I woke up in the middle of the night, I could have a couple of bites of peanut butter. And so obviously something's wrong if I am absolutely insatiable. I couldn't think past the day I was on. I was doing everything I could just to keep my head above water and survive that day. And then every night I would wish that I wouldn't wake up the next day. And so whenever I would wake up the next day, I'd be like, God, darn it, like I got to do it again. And now I'm so excited about the next week, the next month, like all of these beautiful things that are unfolding for me. And then to get to help other people to come out of that darkness, to really crawl out of that pit of mental illness hell is the most rewarding life I could have even imagined. Before would work on techniques and talk therapy and let's go back into your childhood and let's go back to the root cause of these emotions and everything. And I realized that nothing was landing. There was almost like this fog. They can't hear me. We can't do the work whenever they are literally a zombie with inflammation just chocked full in their brain. And so now whenever I meet with somebody, I don't require that they do carnivore, but I require that we have a component first and foremost. That's our foundation, is that we're going to do everything we can to reduce the sugar and the processed food. And what I love is watching the clarity organically come forward, not because we did this technique or they were disciplined on this exercise. It just comes to the surface because we're removing the inflammation from their brain. Every time we get a client, we have to put them on a treatment plan. And that treatment plan includes a diagnosis. And then it includes the modalities that we're going to use. And the modalities that I have available to me never included food for me to be able to talk about food. And therefore, it's just not supported. And it's not something that I can bill for to even talk about or ask that question. What food are you eating? And let's address that. And I was in private practice, but I wasn't the supervisor. So I had to adapt to what they wanted me to do. And I quickly just realized, just call me a coach. I'm going to go do everything online. And I've been able to be more effective with this structure than I ever was as a therapist. I really think it's important to meet people where they're at, because we can only change at the level of where our central nervous system is. And so if their central nervous system is sitting there saying, I'm going to die if I eat this way, I'm going to die if I eat this way, like, we don't have to start there. We don't have to jump in the deep end. And so what I start everyone off is 3 food lists. And 1 food list is all the foods that you're just like, you know what? I'm really good with these foods. These foods are not causing me a problem. And then we have the safety net list in the middle. So I do it like a traffic light. So the green list, ironically, is all of the foods that are good, that are a go. And then the yellow is the safety net list. And those are foods that like, they're your go-to for convenience or when you're having a bad day. And so it might be foods that aren't best for you, but they're not going to derail you. And then we have the red list of the foods that we know we're not going to touch. That's the Doritos and the ramen noodles and the things like that, that we know that they're going to derail you. We just do an experiment.